We're on the same. When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. I'm about the past and about the future.
Welcome back to Draftvice, and today we are talking about defensive backs. Depending on how it gets split up, it might be all defensive backs, or it might be split into corners and safeties. You'll know from being able to look at the title of the episode, though. And today I brought on Ricky, from all the way from back from last year. And now we finally get him back in the room. I was able to convince him. I laid some candy out. I had to trap him. Actually, the door's locked. The door behind the void that's behind us. There's actually an entranceway. But yes, so I brought back Ricky. How's it going?
That's good to be back. You know, I would like to say the excuse of COVID kept us apart, but I feel like I've seen you in other venues quite a bit at family things. So
yes,
it's really just a matter of you think I'd have more free time, but I guess not. So
no, you were working like crazy at one point.
Yeah, so. Hard to do it back then, but just in time because draft is next week.
Yeah.
So
And
I'd wait to the last minute.
And since the draft is the next week, if you follow the show, there's going to be a live show. We're doing a live stream the night of the draft. It's also going to be live from Nanuet, New York, the heart of New York, as I like to say, because nobody cares about New York City or Buffalo or Albany or all the other places or Saratoga. No, Nanuet, New York, the home of the strip mall. We're going to be in at the Spot Billiards. You can come watch in person, or if you're too worried, you still haven't gotten your vaccine, or you just don't like people, or you're too far from Nanuet. Say you're in Cleveland at the draft, but you're like, you know what? I want to hear Walter's opinion on this. You could pull it up. You could see a live stream on the YouTube, the same place where you could find all of our lovely videos. And we will have guests. It's not just going to be me. It'll be me along with a panel of people, of comedians and people who kind of are interested in football. We might even take audience participation into account, have some people who want to pop in and just be like, I hate the Jets, or I hate the Steelers, or I hate the Browns, and then that person will get kicked off the show completely. Take that guy out of here. So, yes, live show, tune in. Live stream on the YouTube, or just show up in person, preferably wearing a mask. Anyway, so today's episode, we are talking about cornerbacks. We'll start with cornerbacks first, and then if we split this, safeties will be on the next episode. So cornerbacks interesting this year. Deep position every year, but deep good position this year.
That was exciting.
It's, right off the bat, like the top three guys. I don't think people felt all excited about the depth in this draft initially. But there's guys but when you looked at the top, right? So Farley was a big one that everybody liked and was talking about initially. And then he had the back issues. And it's like, he's actually had 2 back surgeries, plus he had an ACL. So those are the things that might push him down some teams' boards. They don't know where he's going to end up falling to. Then there was J.C. Horn. And Horn is one of my favorites in this draft class.
Shooting up draft boards.
He's shooting up.
You were on him early.
Yes. So, yes, Ricky has text messages. I'm like, I like this Horn guy. I like him better than Surtain a little bit.
It's almost like they were reading his notes, because then as time went on, all
the
GMs were like, oh, J.C. Horn. I think they're watching this.
I think what they do is they tap your phone, and when I text you something, it's like the Baker Mayfield thing. I'm like, I think the Browns like Baker Mayfield, and I sent that to you back in March of that year, and I'm like, dude, it's at plus 4,000. And then all of a sudden, week of the draft, everybody's like, well, the Browns are taking Baker Mayfield, didn't you hear? Yeah, because they told Hugh Jackson what they were doing. But anyway, we're getting too off topic. Yes, J.C. Horn. I think what I like about J.C. Horn is they put him on the best guy. They move him around. I think it's also the thing I hated about J.C. Horn is to watch his film, you had to spend a lot of time trying to find him because they would move him around the formation.
Left corner, right corner, he's blitzing, he's lined up as a linebacker.
He's in the slot.
Yeah.
They're putting him up against the best guy. They'll put him against Kyle Pitts. He did really well against Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts got a little bit of him a couple of times. But again, they are putting him up against the best guys, and that's kind of cool to see somebody challenged like that. Now, the real problem I think some teams are going to have with him is the assessment of him in zone, and that's just because the team sucked in zone. What are you going to do if the rest of the team's not doing well in zone? How do you gauge this one player where it's just I don't know what South Carolina's doing, to be honest. And but when he's playing press man, when he's on a guy, he's on a guy.
Yeah.
And then like we'll top off the top three, or we'll do the top four real quick because these are the top four on a lot of people's boards, at least from the consensus from what I've seen. Patrick Surtain,
love him,
big fan of him.
Very complete player.
Alabama corner, line primarily up on the left side. Very good family, family lineage, bloodline
very
guy.
Good. His father was a very good corner. Gave the Broncos a lot of problems for a lot of years, and then he also played for the Dolphins as well as the Chiefs. So they're a little different in their styles and their size. He's a little bigger than his dad, but he's a very complete player, a lot like his dad. He's physical. I remember early on, people were kind of questioning his speed, and when you just watch the tape, you can kind of understand why, because he's such a smooth, long-strided runner where it doesn't look like he's exerting himself, but people aren't separating from him.
Yes.
So I think that's why when he tested pretty well, he put all those answers to bed. But that's what happens a lot of times with these long corners. They don't always look as twitchy on film, but he's on people like glue.
Yes, I think that's the key there is the twitch. I think people didn't see. And then, but he's not getting beat, especially because when you're seeing him, he is probably I would say you're going to stick him on one side of the field. You're going to set him up and lock it down from there. And he is so good at getting at you at the line of scrimmage, pressing you, jamming you. Like, as far as guys who are good at jamming at the line of scrimmage and technically sound guys, he's probably the best one in this class.
Oh, yeah. And he's always in good position. So you can tell he does good film study. So it's not just man, it's zone. He's well coached. Not just because of Alabama, but I'm sure his dad had something to do with that. Yeah. But the thing with a lot of Alabama players, particularly the secondary, they're well coached. Saban knows what he's doing. Yes. Now, the knock on that is how much are they going to develop? You know, a lot of these Bama and even Ohio State when Urban Meyer was there, a lot of these guys, they come in ready to start, and they're starters for quite a few years, but they never actually always hit that all-pro level. Yes. And it's because they squeeze all that juice out of them. But I think with an exception might be Patrick Surtain, because I think he still has room to grow on top of the fact that he's been well coached. I don't know that he's one of those prospects that you need to be worried about. I think he's a perennial Pro Bowler from day one. Yes,
and also if you watch the workout of him, he looked like the cornerback version of DK Metcalf, where everybody's just like, "Oh my God, he looks like Megatron. He looks like this just crazy athlete," and he does. It's weird because him and J.C. Horn had their pro days like a day apart from each other, and J.C. Horn was the day later, and he just did everything one little bit better. Yeah, like he was just like, I'm just competing with Surtain. I know that, so I'm just going to do everything better. So I like those. I like both those guys. I think I think it's flavoring kind of guys. Like if you are looking for the guy who I think can eventually be a shutdown man corner, where I'm going to have him travel around on where I'm putting him on the best guy, I might like J.C. Horn better. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for the guy to be like, we're going to put you on this side of the field, we don't have to worry about that side of the field, and we can kind of cheat with our safeties and mess around, I think I would take Surtain. If I want the guy with the solid floor, I want to take Surtain. Yeah. The one issue I have with Surtain is that he played primarily on the left side, so you didn't get to see him even switch to the right side of the field, get to see and especially because the left side of the field, a lot of times, you'll see a lot of quarterbacks coming out don't target the left side a lot already. Mm-hmm. So there is that. That's the one issue of all the things Surtain. I don't think it's a big issue because also guys weren't throwing at him because he was covering them. Yeah. But it is the issue of, like, for instance, people would always say, like, Trubisky can't throw to his left side of to the left. Like, that's an actual problem.
Can't throw to his right either. I mean,
he can't throw in general, but there's a reason why he's the backup to Josh Allen now. Sorry, Mitch. We still love you, kind of, like, as a solid backup.
Yes. But what I would say, too, with that whole left side, right side thing, it's a fair point. But Nnamdi Asomugha made a pretty good career out of that for a long time before switching over to the Eagles. And I think that's one of the comps that he could be drawn to. Another comp I like to draw him to, though, is because I think he has the potential to move around. Sometimes because of his size and his smarts and his ability to tackle, he looks like a safety playing corner. Yeah. And I think longevity-wise, you're talking 10 years down the line, I can see this guy moving to free safety later in his career, a lot like Charles Woodson. Yeah. And I know Charles Woodson, Heisman Trophy, all that other stuff, not quite there right now for Surtain, but I'm not going to put that outside the realm of possibilities for him.
What's funny is a friend of mine, Kev, DJ Intense, been on here plenty of times before, was on the live stream last year. he hit me up and he's like, I think Surtain is probably a safety at some point in his career. He said the same things. He's like, reminds me of Byron Jones. Yeah. And I'm like, yes, but the mistake with Byron Jones was they switched him to safety when he was playing corner the whole time in college. Yeah. And then they're like, why isn't he working at safety? And it's like, well, you drafted a corner. Maybe play him at corner. Right. So it's like the reverse of Demarius Randall before he just kind of flamed out, which was you drafted a safety, you played him at corner, it didn't work out.
And that was an interesting one because usually it goes corner to safety.
Yeah.
Because usually they say, oh, if you're not athletic enough to play corner, maybe move to safety. But sometimes you need to know more of the plays. You need to know more of the smarts, and it doesn't always work. Randall was interesting because he went the opposite. Very athletic safety. They said, why don't we use you at corner?
Yeah, and actually there might be an argument that maybe just having athletic safeties is a devalued element, and we'll talk about that on the safety portion of everything. Next two guys on the list are guys I feel nervous about either one of them because they have injury concerns, different injuries. Greg Newsom out of Northwestern and Caleb Farley. We already talked a little bit about the back, but Caleb Farley is just an interesting cat because if he was healthy, I think there's definitely an argument for him to be number one. The elite level athleticism, we didn't get to see his pro day because he literally had his back surgery the week of the pro day, but he's been clocked going 4.22. He's, I don't think anybody who's watched him is not questioning his athleticism. I think the real problem is you didn't get to see him in a lot of man reps. You got to see him, which might be for a guy who's super athletic, getting to see him more in these off-zone, off-man coverages. You might be like, you know what? I know he could do that. If I could teach him press man, I might be able to get the best out of him. And again, I think he had like 100 or so press man reps his whole time in college. Yeah. He's still relatively new to the position too. So I don't know. I think he's a dynamite athlete. Good zone instincts. So if you already, again, like you have this super athlete in zone, and you're trying to push him to be a man corner, I think I think there is a way of getting him to turn into a good man corner since he has the athleticism.
Right.
And that's still a projection, but it's all projecting. Like, that's a lot of it is you're not seeing every player do every little thing that they're going to be doing at the next level. I think that projection lines up very well. The problem with Farley and the reason why he's fallen off the boards, 2 back surgeries. He had 2 microdiscectomies. I think the first one was a microdiscectomy, where he was trying to, and actually they were like a year apart too. Mm-hmm. So
do you know if they were the same disc?
I don't.
Because that plays a role. If it's the same one, it's reoccurring. That might be an issue because he might need to get it fused at some point in time. If it's 2 different ones, I'd be a little less concerned. But there might be something to talk about with regards to whatever his strength and conditioning program is. If he's not lifting properly, if there's form involved. I don't necessarily think that he's more injury prone than others, but if somebody's not teaching him the proper techniques with regards to weight training, that might have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, so that might affect it. I've heard a little bit more on it as well as it's the same surgery that Tiger Woods had, where initially he came back and he played really well, and then but what ends up happening is maybe there's also an issue down the line of re-injury of if you tackle incorrectly, especially if you're a zone corner, tackling is a big part of playing in zone. But if you're hoping to run a more man coverage scheme and you're not as worried about him tackling and you're okay with him making certain business decisions, then I think maybe you could look at him and be like, you know what, we know we're going to get at least a couple of years out of him. Like he will probably play this next year. He'll be playing in 21, probably 22. The question is the second contract. The question is down the line. Mm-hmm. What are you getting out of him? Are you expending a first-round pick on a guy who you can't even extend down the line?
Yeah.
And then that's, I think, the question teams are going to ask themselves.
So I can actually speak a little bit to this on the personal level because I've had the same thing done. Now, I don't know where in his back it is.
Yeah.
The lower it is, the more concerning it is to me for this because it affects your athleticism and explosiveness. Now, when I first had it, I was back playing. I had it in the off season, and I was back playing and didn't have any problems for the rest of the 3 years I played in college. Now, what it did kind of limit is I've noticed explosiveness in the vertical jump was just a little bit different, which is particularly concerning for a corner at times. Now, he has much better athletic trainers than I did at the D3 level, but it is something to keep an eye on, especially since he's gone through it twice. But as far as speed, as far as hips and all that other stuff and contact, it was never a problem. I can say it ended up being re-injured in like a pickup football game 5 years later or so. It does have a propensity to re-injure itself.
Yes.
But it is also something that can be well managed with proper decompression and a lot of the things that they're allowed to use now that maybe not need to dip back into surgery. And at the end of the day, if you need a fusion, I'm not exactly sure how that translates to the NFL. I'm sure he's not the first person to do it. But it would limit your mobility to some extent. So like you said, early on, I wouldn't be that concerned. But if you're looking about that second contract, you just got to see where he's at that time. If he's had another injury in that time period, even if it's in the offseason.
Yeah, I think my one especially because I haven't heard of a lot of corners having a fusion. I've heard of a lot of offensive linemen having it because they tend to have a lot of back issues. Same thing with defensive linemen. I've heard of a lot of them coming back to play, but they're also not expected to be these, elite athletes chasing around other elite athletes. Their
range of motion is not as important.
So I feel like it's a risk assessment issue. I think teams are going to evaluate it differently. I think, again, if you're a team that has the opportunity to take J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain, that might put him behind those two guys. But you might not have him ahead of Asante Samuel Jr. You might not have him ahead of Eric Stokes because you look at it and you go, well, listen, you know what? He's already better than those guys, and he has such an elite level of possibilities at his talent level. Even if you get him for one contract, he's better at like what you're getting out of him. Right. The other guy I want to talk about in these top four, he's generally in a lot of the top four rankings, is Greg Newsom.
I like him a lot.
Yeah, out of Washington. Now, he's another guy who, again, there's a little bit of projection, didn't play a lot of press man, but played a lot of off-man coverage, played a lot of zone, and showed very good awareness, very good, very, like, oily hips, very good movement
excellent
skills.
Footwork.
Yes.
I watched him break on what I saw, a triple move. I think they're just making up routes out there, but, he broke on it as if he was gambling.
Yes.
And was able to just flip his hips around real quick because his feet never leave the box. When he's doing his back pedal, he's never out of position. He's never overextending. I know one of the knocks on him when I was reading the report was that they worry about his acceleration out of the break in short area quickness like that when change of direction. But his footwork's so good that he's never out of a position where he's gonna need to really make up ground on that part of it. It's what I've seen, and I tend to really like him. He's a good tackler. He's a willing tackler. He shows at least a potential to learn press man. Yes. I mean, I think he's athletic enough to do so. His footwork and his agility is good enough to do so. It's just a matter of what they asked him to do in college, and I would argue that off-man's more difficult. So I actually like the way he played it, and hopefully they're able to use him in a way and then coach him up on the other schemes if they need to transition.
No, and I agree. We're gonna have a couple of guys who are like that, where they didn't get to play a lot of press man, or they didn't get coached maybe even how to do press man, maybe even correctly. So it's good to hear you say that. We're again like getting your assessment of Greg Newsom, and again, I like Greg Newsom. I think my one thing outside of the on the field analysis is he's had injuries over the years, a lot of soft tissue injuries. Mm-hmm. So if you're a team that has maybe where he's your third corner, like there's a lot of talk of the Browns maybe taking him if he falls to them in the 20s. There's probably going to be teams way before them taking him. For instance, the Titans, there's a lot of teams that probably need corners long before the mid-20s. He's probably going top 15, especially if teams rank him ahead of Farley.
Correct, which I personally have him ahead of Farley. Now, again, Farley's great.
Yes.
What frustrates me about Farley, you talked about the injuries. It's less concerning for me right off the bat. What frustrates me with him is he looks so good in the time frame we saw him in. It would be nice to get another year of tape on him to really solidify. Is he better than Surtain and Horn? Yeah. Is he worse than Greg Newsom? So that's why people have him all over the board. People argue, you're preparing for the draft. Maybe because of his injury history, not a bad idea to take a year off and get himself healthy. He's probably doing decompression, all that other stuff he needs to do. So if he leverages that in interviews, that might help. But as far as seeing him on tape, he's got the talent. I would have just liked a little more film.
Yeah, I agree. Also, both those guys you have limited film of because, again, Newsom did not play every game in every season that he was in. With Farley, I agree because he's had both back surgeries in that year frame where he did not play.
Right.
So that's actually kind of the bigger worry of Farley is, well, you didn't play, you opted out, we didn't get your athletic measurables because we didn't get to see you at your pro day. So there is a lot of things that stack on the risk assessment profile of Farley versus Newsom. Listen, guys have soft tissue injuries. You might learn how to. There's ways to sometimes managing
NFL
that.
Athletic trainers, I would hope, might be just one cut above, Big Ten trainers. I don't know.
Yes, but history of soft tissue injuries is sometimes a concern, and it does repeat usually throughout your career. But if you're getting 8, 9, 10 games out of the guy a year, and that's what you're hoping, if you're getting a minimum of 10 games out of Newsom, and then you have a solid backup, and you have a good rotation of corners, maybe that's fine. Mm-hmm. And again, if Newsom's not your number one guy right away, I think that's the best move, is you're able to maybe work around some of the early weaknesses that you might see or the stuff that he hasn't done yet.
Yeah.
And be able to, again, if you have a true number one corner, for instance, again, the Titans I mentioned before is potentially being an option. The other team I'm thinking of is the Cardinals, because they definitely need corner at this point. Cardinals need wide receivers and corners, and that's it to really make their team look at least somewhat more complete. They have Malcolm Butler. Yep. Byron Murphy hasn't turned into an all-pro, but he's at least been a solid slot corner for them. Sure. And now they have that great pass rush up front. They have Budda Baker. I think Newsom to the Cardinals is probably the ceiling of where he might go.
Yep.
And then the floor is probably anywhere in the mid-20s. So I think if he falls to them, I don't see him getting out of the first round. He's a guy who's going to probably, at least in my mind, unless teams are really afraid of that soft tissue, he's going first round.
I could see him being a good fit in Pittsburgh as well. Whether they need how many defensive backs they need, he just feels Pittsburgh to me.
Well,
and
they just got rid of Steven Nelson.
Yeah, and he's also a guy, right, that because of how good his footwork is and because how good he is at off-man, if they need to play him in the slot, if they need to play him as a roll-up safety or anything like that, they have that option because I think off-man and his level of footwork transitions well to that. A lot of times people rely on their athleticism, and he's a good athlete. But the problem with good athletes is sometimes they get a little lazy in their back pedal, they get a little lazy on their footwork because they know they can accommodate, they can make up for it, with their raw athleticism. He seems to be disciplined technician when it comes to that, both natural footwork, and he clearly works on it. So I think that might play a role in where he's valued as well.
All right. So those are the top 4 guys generally on a lot of teams' boards.
I would argue there's somebody else that should be in the top 4, but I know we're going to get to him next.
All right. Asante Samuel?
Yes.
All right. I like it. I like that because I like Asante Samuel a lot too. So let's talk about Asante Samuel. Not the biggest guy in the world, but man, he does everything pretty damn well.
Everything. And it's weird because his dad was a ball hawk, a little bit of a gambler, would get beat a lot, but would make a lot of big plays. And what I would argue with his son is he has the ability to make those big plays, but he's a lot more eye disciplined. He's a lot more read and react. He shows a lot of good man skills as well as zone skills. I love him. And I also think when I was watching his tape initially, the earlier 2019 tape, I was like, he's a little bit of an ankle biter. He's a little bit of not necessarily a rap tackler. That seemed to progress and get a little better. Maybe he put on a little more size. Maybe he got a little more comfortable, not going in there wide-eyed as a younger player. But his tackling got a little bit better. That would be maybe my only concern.
Which is a shock, by the way, because nobody in the Florida Seminoles ever freaking develops anywhere. You look at Hamza Nasir-Eldin, who we'll probably talk on the safety episode, Marvin Wilson. There's so many guys who go there and they stay linear because the coaching there is not great. The fact that he developed, and partially probably because of the family lineage as well.
Yeah, yes.
I think the fact that he even developed there and turned into an even better player is impressive to me on its own feet.
Right.
But like you said, he got better in 2020. A lot better. I remember size being an issue in 2019. It wasn't in 2020.
No, and his dad wasn't all that big either, but his dad was a willing hitter. And not the most technically sound tackler, a little bit of a knee diver as well, but willing and aggressive, and I'm sure he's able to coach his son up on, where you put your head, breaking down before you make the read. He showed some good open field tackling skills as well, where he wasn't just putting his head down and praying he hits a shin. But so it was encouraging, and that's why I kind of have him and Greg Newsom, kind of at 3, and with Farley around 4. Between the two of them, it's tied for me.
See, the one issue I think teams have, I think people have, first off, they probably watched the Clemson game. They noticed that he had some issues with some taller guys in 2019. I think the other issue is the athleticism and the height compared to everybody else in this draft class, where everybody seems to be a tall athlete this year.
Yeah.
He did not measure in super tall, and his athleticism didn't come in at like super great numbers.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe what's holding him back. Some people might look at it and go, well, he ran in the 4.4s. Like, I look at him as maybe a lesser version of Denzel Ward or Jair Alexander. He's not running in the 4.3s, so you're not getting that guy, but maybe like the step down from those two guys, which would still be a very good corner.
Yeah.
Like, that's where I'm seeing him. And that's why I think you and I like him a lot better, is because, first off, he shows the know-how where that he's still athletic. He's not like he's still running in the 4.4s. It's not
running
like
in the 4.4s in the NFL. I mean, most NFL corners are probably in the 4.4, 4.5 range if you just take an aggregate of all of them.
Yeah.
Some of the ones that stand out and go in the first round are running 4.3, and I can concede because he's a little bit shorter and a little bit slighter, you'd want him to be a little more athletic, whereas the taller guys tend to be a little more athletic on this end. But I think they're high-end athletes. I also think he's a product of the times. People love big corners nowadays. It doesn't mean that short corners weren't effective forever before that. So I think maybe if you took this draft 5-6 years ago, you'd be talking about a top 2 guy.
Yeah.
Who knows? But that tends to play a role in it. You're absolutely right.
And also because the other 4 guys in the top 5, generally for people, are guys who are above 6 feet tall and do show good athleticism. Because, again, you have J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, Greg Newsom, and Caleb Farley, all of which have shown a good 1/10 of a second better in the 40 time.
Yep.
Like
and
Farley,
you're talking about height and jumping and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
It really length in terms of press coverage.
So, like, maybe some teams might think maybe he's topped out of what he can do athletically, whereas they might look at those other guys and go, well, we see the potential here, and the potential is a big way of getting yourself fired, but sometimes it's also a good way of getting yourself somebody who can be that next-level player, and that's why some teams look at potential a little bit more. But I agree. I think he's a top 5 corner in this draft class. I know some people – I've seen ranks where he's been all the way down to 8 or 9. Yeah. That blows my mind sometimes because I feel like you're getting a good player. Now,
those are guys that would rather have a 6'4" corner that runs 4.6.
Yeah,
that's what, if they're putting him at
4.3 if we're talking about Eric Stokes.
Well, yes, but what I mean is, typically, I don't know how you put him down that low just with his skills on tape. I would make the case between him and Greg Newsom that Newsom's a much more refined tackler. He's a much more confident in his tackling ability. He's much more consistent with his tackling ability. So, even though we've seen Asante Samuel get better, that's kind of where the if I'm edging one over the other is where I'd put Newsom.
And I think, and the one thing that maybe I like about Asante Samuel better is he does not have the injury history of the other guys that are in his range that, like, again, you look at his tape and you just go, this guy's really good. So those guys I really like. I wouldn't mind taking any one of those guys on day one, with the caveat of the injury and wishing I knew more about the injury for Newsom and especially Farley, because I think Farley could fall all the way to mid-second round because of the injury for some teams.
People get scared.
Yeah, well, especially if you have the opportunity to take a guy who you have similarly rated at maybe a different position of similar value, say an edge rusher who you really like, an Azeez Ojulari. If there's a guy who's like a high-end edge rusher that you maybe like or Kwity Paye or Jason Owe or Joseph Osai, like one of those guys, like maybe you might be like, you know what, I feel okay about my corner room. I'll take the guy who might have the higher ceiling or won't have as many injury concerns. So I could see those guys getting put on boards differently.
Yeah, I think if he played this year, you would. I really think that they would give them a little bit more confidence with regards to dealing with the injury and all that other stuff, how they see it on tape. Now, because he hasn't, and because he's not the clear number one corner, he kind of has slide written all over him, and that's no disrespect to him, but that's just, in my experience, watching these GMs and how they evaluate people, and if they have people similarly rated, they're looking for any reason to just make that decision easier.
It's a winnowing process. Whittle down your board and get the guy who, it's also risk assessment.
Yes.
And if you can, take the risk assessment and make it easier on yourself and say, listen, I at least know this guy's going to play probably 17 games without having to worry too much about there being prior risks or injury, then you're going to take that guy. I've talked about it before with Jalen Phillips and the concussions.
Right.
I think teams are going to really, especially with the concussions, if you have a concussion history, they're going to really push you down the board because that's not even something you can play through.
No.
You have an independent neurologist who has to clear you for that, and that always worries me with some players.
That's a good point.
The next group of guys, I have a Fetu Melifonwu, Stokes, Kelvin Joseph, Tyson Campbell. So
Talk about height, Melifonwu.
Yes, I like Melifonwu. He's another one of those guys. We were talking about Greg Newsom before. played a lot more off man and a lot more zone coverage. But I mean, like if you watch the NC game where they're playing against Diami Brown, I mean, he was tackling, he was throwing guys around, he was cutting in on routes really well. He's a big guy, but he moves really well. He tested really well as well, but that's not really why I like him. I was a little bit more skittish on him initially, and then that was just kind of like, all right, Syracuse guy, big 6'3" dude. How do these guys always, how's he going to translate? His brother Obi Melifonwu played safety, came out of UConn. People were really high on him. It was a second-round pick, didn't work out for the Raiders. Now, partially, keep in mind, he was on the Raiders. So they've had a lot of turnover for positions. They get rid of good guys.
And particularly in the secondary. They seem to just, I don't know whether they're not developing people properly in the secondary. Their scheme fits are off. But for years and years and years, they would always take corners, safeties, and they'd be on somebody else's team in a few years.
But yeah, so now I think he's actually in San Fran now, which is weird because I feel like everybody who was a Raider in the last 3 years is now in San Francisco doing something at least for the training camp. So listen, it's fine. Obi Melifonwu, Maurice Hurst, Arden Key, all in San Francisco. So with Melifonwu, I like him a lot. I like what he can do in off coverage. I like seeing what he stays in phase with receivers really well. He's a good tackler. He hits hard. The only thing is, again, like we're talking about before, where he had very little press man reps and even lesser amount. Like I don't think he jammed a single receiver ever at the line of scrimmage. Those are things that were just not on his tape, and I think those are the things you maybe worry about more with him. And again, he doesn't have the athletic profile of Greg Newsom. He's about another 1/10 of a second slower.
Yeah,
he's still in the 4.4s, but you're talking about 6'3", running in the 4.4s. Now he's going to have that ability to maybe have the, he's going to be able to make up some of that because he has the length and the height. So he's going to be able to jump up. He's going to be able to jump up, turn around, and hit a ball down a lot easier than somebody who's say 5'10".
Yeah. You would make the case that somebody like him has press man written all over him. When it's kind of ironic that he played a little bit more in an off man scheme, because I worry about lengthy guys playing off typically because of the change of direction when smaller guys are running up on them and causing them to get in their back pedal and then getting out of that back pedal.
Syracuse's defense didn't make any sense.
No.
And they have 3 really good D-backs there, too.
Yeah.
Between him, Trill Williams, and we'll talk later about Andre Cisco. All 3 of those guys were very interesting prospects. And, if they were in a different scheme, people would be talking about him even more so.
Yep.
The fact that he was good in those other things kind of makes me like him more.
Yeah.
And then if you get a coach who can coach him up in playing press man, who could give him, teach him how to, some good techniques and how to jam a receiver at the line of scrimmage. And again, if he's going to the right situation, he doesn't have to do all that right away.
Right.
So
and I'll bring a couple color commentators and other people who comment typically on the draft and prospects have made this point, and I'll bring it up again. When you're talking about someone from like Alabama and some of these other schools that have very good coaches, you squeeze all the juice out of them, you might actually end up getting somebody who progresses even more in the NFL. When you talk about something like Syracuse, who clearly they were good at recruiting, if they've got these higher end prospects all being talked about in the first 2 or 3 or 4 rounds, if their scheme wasn't a good fit, coaching can lock that up real quick. And some of these GMs, the reason why they're rated so high is people are looking at them and saying they could be good. There's a reason why they're not, and if it's coaching, that's easily taken care of.
Yeah, and I think he's more of a second-round guy. I think teams are going to be too skittish to take him in the first round. Yeah. Level of competition, the defensive scheme, not getting to see him do everything he'd be doing at the next level. But he's probably a top 50, top 2-round player in the draft. I think he's not falling out of the second round. At least I don't think. But then again, I saw Shaq Griffin fall into the 3rd round, and the Seahawks took him. And that was a steal where a guy, and he ran 4.3s and was like a really solid player. But this is a guy who I like him a lot. I think there's a range of dudes in that kind of like mold again this year. Mm-hmm. Another guy we could talk about is Eric Stokes out of Georgia and Tyson Campbell out of Georgia.
Typically like Georgia DBs.
Yes,
I do.
DeAndre Baker didn't turn out all that great, but that was also because he was drafted by the Giants.
He also had some off-the-field issues, I believe.
Yes,
right?
They just kicked him out the door, and they're like, we're not keeping you around. It was funny because he ended up being cleared of all that. So
I know. That's, who knows? But maybe that had something to do with their patience of being able to develop him. It's like, why are we investing in somebody that may or may not be guilty?
Yeah, and the Giants seem to be way more skittish of those things. Yeah. Maybe because of the media market.
Could be a Gettleman thing. Could be a culture thing they're trying to do. I don't know.
I think it's more of a Mara thing because they did that with Janoris Jenkins a couple years ago, where he said something not very nice on Twitter, and people kind of flared him
he
for
had
it.
issues coming out. I think he had issues. Didn't he come out of like South Alabama or something? He transferred from somewhere in college, and there was some issues in his past. I don't want to slander anybody. I just remember like you would think that the Giants would be like, there's a trail history of that. If we're really concerned about it, maybe we should just avoid it altogether. But
Janoris Jenkins wasn't signed by Gettleman, though. He was signed by, I think he was a Reese guy. And then when they got rid of Reese, Gettleman came in, and that might have been the difference. Is maybe Gettleman doesn't like that. Maybe I still think it's a Mara thing. I think it's a New York market thing, knowing like
the Giants have a pretty.
They want to have a good look.
They feel like one of those brands that's trying to be like all clean cut guys. They just feel like it. I don't know if that's the truth. It just feels that way. The Jets are a little bit more renegade.
I feel like they're well, at least the fans are more renegade.
Oh yeah, it's like night and day.
I also feel like the Giants have this kind of regal atmosphere around them. Like again, like they care more about appearance than actually performance. I feel like sometimes, you look at OBJ and then the Eli Manning thing. Eli Manning getting benched, people, fans being up in flames about that, and then it's like. It's a whole other mess, and we shouldn't be relitigating the Giants anyway. We should be on to the next corner. We were talking about Stokes and Tyson Campbell. Stokes, I mean, supreme athlete. I think it's tested his pro day. We're off the chart. He also did, I think he tested at House of Athlete as well. So he's got two different athletic profiles that tested for him. And again, tested in the 4.2s, 4.3s. At corner, again, this is his 3-cone was really good, top percentile 3-cone. So athletic profile really good. I don't even think Georgia coaches their guys that great in as far as
I think they recruit well.
They recruit well.
That's why I think a lot of their guys, when they're there, they're what they are.
Yes,
and if they're really good out of high school, or if they're really they don't always improve. But typically, I like their potential because of that.
Let me see if I'll pull up my notes on him. Because I just finished. I watched a bunch of his games. So yes, 4.340, 4.40. That was like his highest number rated. There was also the one he did at House of Athlete, which they did two different. They did the laser time, and then they also did a hand time, but they did the hand time like the way they do it at the combine. Yeah. So it's hand start and laser end. So again, and that was 4.2. The other one was, and then the pure laser time was still 4.3. So he's fast, long speed wise. 4.96 3-cone, 39-inch broad jump, 128-inch broad jump, 32-inch arms. All this stuff is in the 80 percentile. So
what was this 3-cone?
6.96 3-cone.
Okay.
So under 7 3-cone.
I thought you said 4.96 at first, and I was like, Jesus Christ, somebody draft him right now.
Yeah, right.
Nobody's getting away from him.
And what I liked about him is they were not afraid of putting him up against the fastest receivers, clearly because he has the athletic profile. Played a lot of man coverage. If you're drafting him, you want to be drafting him for a man coverage scheme. But he showed really good awareness in zone. Like, I honestly think his zone awareness is something that's undercut. A couple of his interceptions were in zone, both in, I think it was let me see, I think the Arkansas game, he was playing one of his INTs. Let me see if I could pull that off. He had 2 INTs that I saw that I really liked, and one of them was, he was playing off, and I think he was actually in man coverage on this one, but they were running a pick route, and he actually was able to get through the muck with the pick route, jump the route, get the interception, and run it in for a touchdown. And you're not catching Stokes if he's getting an interception and running in for a touchdown. So you have that pure athleticism there. He shows the movement skills. I think he's going to get pushed into the first round. He's the kind of guy I could see the Steelers going after. Kind of reminds me of Artie Burns. The thing is, the Steelers run a lot of zone concepts, and in fact are usually even still a very zone-heavy team. If you are drafting Stokes and you're putting him in a zone-heavy team, you're not utilizing him to his best ability, but I think he's solid enough where he could pull it off. Yep. So I like Stokes a lot. I like the athleticism. I don't think I was as high on him early on in the process. And then as I got to watch more film with him, I go, oh, you know what? This guy kind of knows what he's doing a lot better. Very good awareness. They put him on Anthony Schwartz in the Auburn game, which that guy is fast as well. In fact, one of my favorite receivers if you're going like 3rd, 4th round range. Like that's a guy who 6 feet tall, runs 4.22s. Both those guys are are track meet guys. So his change of direction, at least in the 3-cone, was better than Tyson Campbell's. Tyson Campbell did not do as well in that. So I'm thinking Tyson Campbell's more along the. And when I saw Tyson Campbell, he did not look that bad when he had as far as his change of direction. He was just not he did not have his 3-cone was I think 4. I think I have it on here too. Tyson Campbell 7.15 3-cone, 4.37 40, 124 broad jump. So that was still good. He's 6'1". He's got 32-inch arms too. So I think he's more of a Trey Waynes kind of guy.
Yeah.
Where if you have him in the right scheme, in the right system, especially if you're running a lot of cover 4, I think he's going to be great for you.
Yeah.
If you want him to be going up, you're never going to put this guy in the slot. And if you are, you're dumb. I don't know why you're doing that.
Yeah.
He's an outside corner. Both these guys are outside corners, almost purely.
Yeah.
Both have really good height, over 6 feet tall. I think one has got the propensity to maybe be. I think Stokes is higher on my list because he's got the propensity to maybe be if you're talking about that top 5 guys, the guy who could break into that would maybe be Stokes down the line. He's had some mishaps, and he's been cooked a couple of times as well in coverage. The Alabama game didn't look good for either of them, but
it doesn't look good for most people.
Yeah, you're going up against guys who are Devontae Smith. For all the comments about his size,
look, you can't have it both ways. People bang on Mac Jones because he had all this talent. But then, you might evaluate a corner that played against all that talent. Like, wow, he didn't do well against them. It's like, well, which is it? Are these guys NFL superstars at the Alabama level, or are they not? In which case, Mac Jones looks better. So I would argue that, yes, that is a light into the guys they're going to see in the NFL. But it's also like, if you had your worst game against Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, well, also, see, that was the funny thing is I remember there was a thing that came up about J.C. Horn. Sam Monson is a guy who, for PFF, I think they had a video clip of him kind of bashing J.C. Horn, being like, oh, Devontae Smith put him in a blender. I wouldn't argue that Devontae Smith put him in a blender. He got quite a few catches against him. He did pretty well.
Yeah.
It was also his 2019 film, and he developed a lot in 2020.
Right.
I think what he did in 2020 was just off the charts.
And it shouldn't be – I know we're jumping around, but we should mention, because we've mentioned everybody else as a legacy, J.C. Horn, Dad Joe Horn, phenomenal wide receiver. That can be beneficial in terms of insight into route concepts and recognizing when people are moving. And that I wouldn't put it past J.C. Horn to have played receiver at least in high school. So I'm sure that helps him going forward too in terms of recognizing route concepts, understanding how hips might give away where somebody's going. So. Also helping with coaching on that front.
One of my favorite lines about J.C. Horn is he plays corner like he has daddy issues because he is brutal to receivers. And it's true, too. And that's why I like J.C. Horn a lot. So, anyway, did you have any further comment on Tyson Campbell,
nope.
Eric Stokes?
It sounds like Eric Stokes is your guy to like.
It was weird because I didn't like Eric Stokes initially, and I kind of started
like, I mean, I can see you're being fair. You're evaluating both.
I still like Asante Samuel better. I still like Asante Samuel.
Yeah.
I know people who have Stokes ahead of him.
Personally,
and Afetu ahead of him, which I think now you're starting to become size queens.
It's crazy. You could be like 5 or 6 corners in the first round. Maybe more depending upon what people want and need. I mean,
I think it might go the other direction. I think there's only going to be 3 or 4. And you
really think? Because I'm thinking because you do have Surtain, you have Horn, and you have Farley might slide, but it's hard to picture Newsom. He gets it to the late 20s. Asante Samuel, late 20s.
I think it's
somebody like Stokes, and they like the size.
I think it's 4 at most. I think 4, 5 at most, and here's why. One, I do think Farley falls out of the first round.
Okay, wow.
Newsom. So also, part of it's the team needs for all those teams in the first round, and I think there's going to be a massive run on tackles. And I think some teams' evaluation of some of these corners is going to be, I can get somebody similar in the second round.
It's deep, and the
it's
offensive
deep,
line is good
up
at the top. And they have some decent depth, but I would argue that the corners and even safeties depth the corners depth anyway is a little bit better. So a lot of the teams that need corners also need offensive linemen.
Yes.
It seems like that's how it's working.
Yeah, well, especially the Titans, the Steelers.
I would argue the Chiefs can use help on the back end as well as at the offensive line position.
Yes, but that Les Snead guy did really well last year. They got a couple of those corners that were like late round dudes. But yes, you're right. And now they're also not drafting anymore in the first round either.
Right.
So because they just trade for Orlando Brown, which I haven't even discussed yet on the show. They traded they swapped their first round pick for the Ravens' second round pick to get Orlando Brown plus a couple of other picks. So there was a little bit of a pick swap. Kind of, if you look at the total value, it's like they basically trade a mid-second round pick to get Orlando Brown of the Ravens, who wants to play left tackle. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal, I think. I think that makes that offensive line a lot better. Yeah. It is going to be interesting to see Orlando Brown play primarily in a passing-heavy scheme.
Yes.
Where previously he was in a run-heavy scheme.
Yes.
So it is going to be interesting to see that. Still, between him and Thuney, you're going to be running a lot more gap plays. You're going to be, both those guys are very good pullers. You're going to be able to maul people with those two guys because they are just big dudes. A lot more power plays. They're going to give. I think they're going to give Clyde Edwards-Helaire a little bit more time.
Yeah.
A couple of other guys. Kelvin Joseph, I wanted to talk about a little bit. I liked Kelvin Joseph.
I liked him initially. He has some decent tape against Alabama, particularly Devontae Smith.
Yes.
But he's again not a guy that I feel like I have too much insight on. He was intriguing, but I feel like there's something to his game where he just seems like a step behind in some cases.
Good feet, not everything working between the ears.
Maybe that's it.
Like his eyes and I think his understanding of route concepts is still relatively new. He didn't play a lot in college. He doesn't have a huge sample size. He played for LSU.
Yeah.
Then he transferred because he
seemed like he was out of position in times where he could have made it easier on himself.
Yeah, there was so I think there was one play where they were playing Florida and Pitts burned him for a touchdown.
Yeah.
But Kyle Pitts is really good. Kyle Pitts is a top 5 pick in this draft,
folks. He's the best player in the draft outside of Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah,
because how quarterback's valued. If you didn't get value quarterback that way,
So he got burned by Kyle Pitts on I would say just a really amazing play by Kyle Pitts. But there's just times where he kind of he loses track. Like I said, the hands and the eyes don't always help him very much. Like he just kind of doesn't always know maybe all the concepts that he needs to be following. Part of that might be a more developmental track, right? He, like I said, he's got really good feet. He has the feet to keep with anybody.
Yeah.
And that's maybe, I think he's more of a day 2 guy.
Yeah. For sure.
I know there were some people who have him like as their top 3 corner, and there's 2 reasons why that's not going to happen. One, I just think he has some lacking moments. 2, he's had multiple times where, like when he was at LSU, there's a reason why he's not at LSU anymore. Yeah. There was he got suspended for the bowl game when he was at LSU. He transferred to go to Kentucky. He played really well at Kentucky.
Yep.
And then when he played at Kentucky, though, basically at the end of the season, like he was starting to kind of like check out and be like, "Yo, like I think I might opt out, but I don't want to opt out. I want to be around." Eventually, the coaches are like, "Listen, either opt out or don't. Like, just opt out or play. We need to know. You need to make a decision here." Yeah. So he opted out, but the coaches were basically like pushing him out the door a little bit because they were kind of getting tired of that kind of shtick. So,
and that's what it ends up looking like, is a shtick when you're half in, half out. It's
like
you're either completely convinced that this is what's best for you and your family, or you're all in on the team.
And they were getting
1 foot in, 1 foot out is like, do you want it both ways? What's the,
So there might be some maturity question marks. So I think he's going to be a day 2 guy. I think he probably goes in the 3rd round. I think he has the 2nd round pick play level. Like I think he's a guy who would team, if they spend a 2nd round pick, I would not be shocked on him. Mm-hmm. I think he's more likely to go 3rd round. Latest I see is 4th round. I think early day 3 is the latest I could see him fall, but it depends on how teams investigate. I think part of that would be that off-field thing.
Yeah.
So
they have more insight than we do.
Yeah. Why was he suspended when he was at LSU? What was going on here? If it was something like it depends. It could be a drug test. It could be this. It's like, if those were the things, maybe teams feel a little bit better about it than other things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Kelvin Joseph, like I said, good feet. Kind of not not always the best awareness guy, though. Not best football IQ, but maybe I think he still has the opportunity to learn. So that's why I like him a lot too. And he was a guy who I kind of like jumped on early in the process. Yes. I do like him. And there's moments where I like him better than Stokes. Like there are things that I like because I think he's already at a level where he's pretty good.
It seems like you're trying to convince yourself out of Stokes, but you can't help it.
Well, honestly, if I was doing a list right now, I might say I would like him more than Stokes. I think the part of Stokes' athletic profile kind of sells me on it. But they both have good athletic profiles.
Yeah,
I think the thing that worries me about Kelvin Joseph is more about the other things than the on-field stuff.
Right.
And that's why I don't have that worry with Stokes, and maybe that's why I put Stokes ahead of him in these rankings. If I was going pure on-field, I'd probably lean Joseph. And that's kind of that's the way I would look at it.
Okay.
Other guys that I kind of like, Adebo and Benjamin St. Juste, those are guys that are more third-round guys for like those cover 3, cover 4 schemes.
Yeah, I was going to say, because Adebo...
he opted out.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Stanford guy, obviously smart. I think that he's got pretty good, fairly prototypical size. Like, I think that where he lacks sometimes is that short area quickness, and maybe it's not as important in the schemes he's playing. But, we talk about another Stanford guy, Richard Sherman. It's like, he also didn't have great short area quickness, but he was physical, and he was a former receiver, so he was very good at understanding route concepts, and that's one of the ways you can make up for that. I don't know Adebo's history with regards to that, but definitely, an interesting prospect at the very least.
Yeah, I think he's probably more likely to. He's one of those guys that would really benefit from going to a Seattle cover 3 scheme, or if you're going to maybe a Viking style scheme where you're playing a lot of cover 4 and you have the split safeties and you're like what you are in charge of taking care of is not necessarily having to play a lot of, like, again, shifty receivers. You're playing on the outside. You know your responsibility, especially if you're playing a lot of a lot of zone concepts. I think he'd be very good at that.
Yep.
You got to match up on the right guy. So I think he runs. I guess Shaq Griffin I was talking about earlier. That's the kind of guy who I think is that third round Shaq Griffin kind of style dude. St. Juste actually shows a little bit better short area quickness than him and showed up really well at the Senior Bowl. And I think teams are going to be really high on St. Juste, especially, again, kind of third, fourth round guy who has that size, athleticism profile that teams like. Again, another big dude. There's a lot of those in this draft class. That's, I think, why teams might like this draft class a lot corner-wise, because it's got a lot of depth.
Yep.
Any other guys that you were looking to mention as far as corners go?
No, we don't have to dip into them, but just particularly with regards to the possibility of playing slot corners and maybe a little bit more. But you're looking at guys like Eric Molden, and you're looking at guys like Aaron Robinson, and they're
Molden. I wanted to talk about when we talk safeties, because I feel like there's that little bit of
that's why I think about slot corner and even maybe like a Budda Baker role. Like, you're talking about guys that they're maybe don't have the top end speed or the size that would give you confidence on the outside. Doesn't mean they can't play it, but it just seems like you'd be doing them a disservice not to give them the best chance of succeeding, and I think that they can succeed in those roles. Yeah,
so I think Molden, for me, I like him as like that kind of Budda Baker quasi safety dude.
And they were both Washington, right?
Budda Baker,
Molden is
Elijah Molden is Washington, yes. So I there you go, and I liked watching his tape, and again, they did play him a lot at safety. He was about 50% slot. And then, he split the other 2 safety roles quite a bit. So I liked him a lot. We'll talk more about him in the safety episode and where I kind of feel about him. Tay Gowan is another guy who, another opt-out guy, good athleticism. I think he's probably going to be another. I don't know how teams are going to value him. Because, again, opt-out UCF guy, him and Aaron Robinson, I don't know how teams are going to value both those guys. Aaron Robinson's more of a slot corner, but more of a press man slot corner, which is not, if you do a lot of coverage looks, you do a lot of press man, you kind of like that kind of guy. If you can have a guy who can, press out of the slot, and you're going up against a lot of tough dudes, I kind of like that kind of a player. He's kind of a third-rounder for me as well. And then Tay Gowan, I think, is kind of going to be a mid-round guy who might fall a little bit because of, They just don't have the tape, limited sample size, but he tested really well. And he opted out because he got COVID and his family. He also had a young child who had some issues, so he did not want to run the risk of her getting COVID as well.
And I think that's what a lot of teams are going to look into with regards to the opt-outs. It's like whether or not, like, GMs, they nitpick everything. They're going to want to know why you opted out. Was it? Do you have someone at home with some sort of medical condition? Are you just focused on going to the NFL? How all in are you on football? There's a lot of things that they're going to have to dissect. And when you start getting down to the nitty gritty, if those are the cases, they might be something that they're not going to hold it against them. Other reasons they might. And Deion Sanders pointed this out very early on. He said, I know it's a little bit controversial to say, but this is how teams evaluate you. And sometimes if you opt out, you have to understand that might be something held against you, or it might not. depending upon what they think you did it for.
It's also there's two ways it gets held against you, right? It lowers your sample size. You get less playing tape in the NFL. And then the other end of it is it maybe the teams ask like your commitment to football.
Yeah.
I think with a guy like Tay Gowan.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like if you have specific reasons and maybe they look into that and they say, oh, non-issue.
Yeah, but then you still look at the sample size, the ability to really get to evaluate the player, and you might be like, well, we don't really have enough to go off on this.
Right.
One more dude I wanted to mention, he's a slot corner. He played horrible when he played at outside corner, was Sean Wade.
You know what? I'm glad you brought him up because I typically bring up Ohio State corners, and I meant to bring him up before this, so thank you for bringing him up.
Because he's the only Ohio State corner really that has a big name in this draft, and he did not play well.
And I feel like
he's one of those guys
higher in the past. The more he played, the lower he got graded.
The further outside he played, the worse he got graded.
And that's why maybe because he played in the slot when he first got there, because obviously he's lower on the depth chart.
Yeah.
You have a lot of talented corners that come out of Ohio State. Being forced to play outside maybe expose some things.
Maybe he didn't have the athleticism. There's also maybe some questions that it expose his confidence level. Because, let me put it this way. To be a corner, you have to have confidence, right?
Resilience.
Yeah, you have to, and if you keep on getting your confidence shaken, like that's not going to be helpful.
You almost got to be arrogant to the point where it's like you have to be like, oh, that didn't matter. You know what I mean? Like it just rub it off like a
it's
like
a
water
one play,
to a duck.
What's the thing? It's a one play game or whatever. You don't think about the next. You don't think about the last play.
Because you don't want it
to
domino. You can't be thinking about the last play when the next play is at hand. Otherwise, you're going to trip yourself up.
Yeah,
and that is the number one thing with corners. Other positions, you need to learn from your mistakes. I'm not saying you don't with corner, but not in game. In game, you need to be like nothing.
But that's a guy who might have gotten hurt by not opting out. Because think about it, if he had opted out, then everybody's just looking at his old tape. Oh yeah, he played
and they'd
really
be like,
well.
oh, he could probably play on the outside. You know?
Yeah. So they might be like, maybe we'll play him on the outside, but at least we could play him at slot. They pick him as a 4th rounder or something, or maybe even a 3rd rounder. And then he blows up on you, and then there's the turducken that you didn't expect to have. But yeah, like he played really well at slot. I think there's been a lot of questions about maybe moving him to safety. And we'll talk more about safeties when we get to that. As far as that goes, I think that was
everyone that we needed to mention about.
I think those were the primary ones. Yeah, the ones.
There's always people that surprise you.
I'm trying to think of other ones that I can't think of one off the top of my head anymore.
No.
But those are primarily the ones that I've looked into, liked, enjoyed watching their film. Some of the questions that you might have with them. But yeah, so if you want, you can follow the show at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch like a delicious drink you drink in the summer. You can follow Ricky nowhere.
Don't follow me.
Don't follow him
Please
at
don't
all.
follow me at all.
It's a little creepy. You also tune into the live stream show. It's going to be a big, weird, crazy bonanza.
I'll be there. Vaccinated, I'll be there, so just come up to me and cough on me. It's fine.
Yeah, if you're showing up, you can see Ricky. He'll be there, and then I'm gonna maybe try and do a little bit of crowd stuff. Maybe have people if they want to show up and be like, "Yo," like I said before, fuck the Steelers or fuck the Packers. Yeah, you'll get to be able to say that live on YouTube and in front of a room full of people at a billiards hall. So yes, check it out, Nanuet, New York, and have a nice day.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous about the past and about the future.